Hey, what's happening? Chris Martinez here. I am the host of Operation Agency Freedom, and today we are going to be talking with Corey Quinn, who not only just wrote an amazing book that I highly recommend that you check out. I downloaded a copy, he's giving it away for free. But more importantly, he's going to be talking about his time with Scorpion and how he was able to take them from like 20 million in revenue to over 100 million in revenue using this really cool strategy where you basically send out gifts to your ideal prospects. So really, really good episode. I don't talk a lot about revenue generation, but this was so unique that I had to have him on the show. And of course, we're going to go into all the background stuff of like how you set it up and who you send out to. And I learned a lot. And this strategy is actually something that I will be implementing for myself. So if you're one of my ideal prospects, you might get something in the mail soon. So with that being said, if you want a really, really unique and targeted lead generation strategy that doesn't really use anything with like digital marketing stuff, I highly recommend that you check this out. It is proven. I'm also going to be testing it out for myself. So hopefully I will be a testimonial to this strategy. But with that being said, let's dive into the episode. So we've got Corey Quinn on the show, a fellow native Angelino like myself, which is very rare. He's still there. I'm obviously in San Diego. So welcome to the show, Corey.
Thank you, Chris. You're in sunny San Diego, where I'm trying to convince my wife to move, but not been successful so far.
Dude, I moved to San Diego in 2013 and I have not looked back. I can't imagine going back, actually. It's the best.
Yeah, it's like a mindset. San Diego, it's like living in LA maybe in the 70s or the 60s. It's like it's
well, what killed me about LA is there are a lot of amazing things that you could do, but the traffic is so bad, and you're on the west side.
Yeah.
This is why everybody stays in their little bubble, because you can't get anywhere. It's going to take you 4 hours.
I don't go east of the 405. Now with, working from home, I just don't leave the house. I mean, I have maybe a 1 mile radius that I travel 95% of my life exists in. So yeah.
And if you traveled outside that 1 mile radius, it's like you're looking at 2 hours of traffic.
Oh yeah. To go like 3 miles. It's crazy. Tragic.
So, yeah. But yes, if you can convince your family to come down to San Diego, I highly recommend it. It's amazing down here. And what's crazy is they complain about traffic, but I'm like, this is nothing. Like,
nothing. Right.
Go from Chula Vista to North County in 45 minutes. They're complaining about that. I'm like, this is amazing. So anyways, we're not here to talk about traffic or LA. I want to hear about you. So you've got a pretty unique story. You worked for one of the biggest agencies, if not the biggest agency in the United States, Scorpion. You were their CMO for a number of years. You got a new book that came out. You have your podcast, like a lot of exciting things happening with you. So as always, let's get some backstory on where you came from. I know you grew up in Brentwood. So let's go all the way back to like high school, and then we're going to work our way back up.
So I spent half the time in my high school. I went to Pacific Palisades High School in Pali High, right? And so I spent a lot of time not in school, but surfing the coast and going down to Mexico and TJ and surfing and whatnot. But yeah, so grew up here. A lot of my friends either went to Santa Barbara, San Diego, or Santa Cruz. I was in the Santa Cruz cohort. So went up there, spent about 5 years in Santa Cruz, taught surfing. I majored in anthropology.
Nice.
Lots of stories around that. But effectively couldn't wait to come home so that I could start a business with my best friend. I won't go into much detail, but we raised $6 million from a business plan. It was all about streaming media back in the day. This is back when the .com sort of bubble was
like
was
98, 99, right around there.
98, 99. We launched a business. Effectively, it was live on location streaming media. This is long before the iPhone, and a lot of these other technologies. But effectively, we were doing that about the same time that Mark Cuban sold his business, broadcast.com, to Yahoo for, I think, $1 billion.
Yeah.
Well, we were doing something similar, but on the streaming video. He was
radio.
Audio.
Yeah.
Right. Which is the bit rate was much, much better for those days. Whereas video was a lot more bit rate intensive, a lot more bandwidth was required. Back then, you and I and everyone else, we were dialing in with the 56K modem, right? So it was a different time. In any event, fast forward a bit, I did a stint in finance here in LA and went back to school, got my MBA from USC. And I left USC and I got a job in sales, biz dev, but it's basically sales for a digital marketing agency selling into enterprise retail brands. And the interesting thing about that business that relates to where I'm at today is that it was founded by a, excuse me, a Harvard Business School graduate.
Okay.
And if you're from the States, if the listeners are from if you're from the States, you know that Harvard Business School is known for their amazing network of people
Yes.
who've been through that school. And as a result of being a graduate of Harvard Business School, he had a direct line to the CMO of Remax and of Lululemon and of Hyundai and so on and so forth. So effectively, how we built this agency that he founded was he would use his golden Rolodex to help get us on the sales team very, very hot leads that we would go in and close. And we sort of built the agency based on that model. The next
Wow.
agency I worked at, yeah, it was very successful. It was actually sold to another larger holding company. The next agency I worked with, this time I was a sales manager, kind of running the sales department. It was founded by the ex-CEO of MySpace, right? So the MySpace,
Yeah.
and the way that MySpace makes money is from advertisers. So he had a huge Rolodex, again, of all these really big advertisers. And guess how we grew this agency? He used his charisma and his relationships, and he got all these really great meetings that myself and the sales team would close based on a relationship.
Nice.
And it wasn't until I went over to Scorpion back in 2015 that I saw something very different. By the way, at this time, I realized, right, I came to believe that the way you build an agency, a successful agency, is you have a really well-connected, charismatic founder who just knows a lot of people and kind of just, brings them in.
That is a nice formula. Yeah. I don't know how scalable that is, but yes, that is a nice
Well,
formula if you can tap into that.
That's it. That's it. So you know where I'm going with this. So
Yeah.
at Scorpion, by the time I joined in 2015, it was already a successful agency, primarily focused on personal injury attorneys. And I'll never forget going into the sales floor. There's a 6-person sales team. They would get these calls from an attorney, one call closed. They would close the deal on the very first call. And of course, when they did that, there was a big metallic gong on the floor. They would hit the big gong. It was high fives all around.
Nice.
These guys were living the dream because they had these wonderful inbounds coming in, easy to close. And what I realized very quickly was that these attorneys who were calling these salespeople on the sales floor did not know who the founder of Scorpion was, did not care about that. That was not part of the criteria that they needed to have to make a buying decision. What they cared about was working with an expert who had experience in solving the lead gen or the marketing problem for attorneys, which of course, which was the positioning of Scorpion at the time. And so what I learned was that in order to build an agency, you don't need to be necessarily what I call founder-led. You don't have to be a founder-led sales motion. In fact, another way to grow and build a successful, more scalable agency is to have a specialization in a vertical market and become known as an expert in that domain. We took that expertise that Scorpion had built in attorneys, specifically in personal injury. We expanded into home services, into franchise, medical, all these verticals, running a very similar play that allowed us to go from 20 million to 150 million in just 6 years.
Wow. 20 million to 150 million in 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's service fees. That's not spend. Ad spend was much more than that. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's amazing. So obviously we got to figure out how in the world did you do that? So actually, before we get there, so you left Scorpion. I don't know how long that's been.
Yeah.
But now give us a summary for what it is that you're doing.
Sure. So today I've left Scorpion at the end of 2021. So it's been about 2.5 years now. And I've focused on doing something that I'm really passionate about, which is to help agency founders who are successful. They have a growing agency, but they're stuck in that founder-led motion. And typically there's 3 things that cause them to be stuck in that founder-led motion. Number 1 is that they're more of a generalist. They're working with businesses of all shapes and sizes, and therefore they are more of a jack of all trades. They lack focus, so they lack repeatability. In the sales process specifically, when you work with a lot of different businesses, it's very hard for anyone else but the founder to be able to be successful in a sales role. That's number 1. Number two is having watered down positioning. This happens when you're losing deals to competitors, lesser firms, you're competing on price, and people just don't really understand how to distinguish your agency from the other guys that they're talking to. So
Okay.
the watery positioning gets them stuck in founder-led sales. And then the third thing is anytime the founder leaves the sales department,
Mm-hmm.
sales grinds to a halt, right? And that is because they don't have a really good strategy for how to generate more pipeline without the founder. And so the work that I do is 3 steps. We, number one, help them define a vertical market that they can focus on. Number two, position the agency as a specialist in that vertical market.
Mm-hmm.
And then number three, develop a strategy to fill their business and their pipelines with the best businesses in that vertical market.
Love it. Awesome. So let's now go back.
Okay.
And I want to hear some of the details. I'm sure there's like a million things that you could talk about.
Sure.
What are some of the, I don't know, 3 to 5, if you could look back, what are some of the 3 to 5 like key things that you did to go from that 20 to 150 million in revenue?
Sure. So I was brought in as an outsider. That company, Scorpion, by that time had been built upon the founder, Rustin, had hired a lot of his high school buddies, and they had really built this amazing, truly a success story in itself. Rustin, the founder, had such an appetite for growth. He wanted to go way beyond where we were. And so one of the biggest challenges that we had to face was how do we have established our brand in our so our services within attorneys, but we're subsisting exclusively on inbounds and referrals. And the challenge, of course, with that, and the agency owner knows this, is that you can't really directly influence the number of inbounds or referrals that you're driving. And so what we had to do is we had to bring in an outbound sales motion, which was brand new to the agency, brand new to the sales team, again, who were really enjoying the fact that they could just pick up a call and take an order and, make a commission.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas outbound is where you have to do something very unnatural, which is you have to call people to get them to talk to you and listen to your pitch and get them to buy from you, which is it's a lot of friction. So we did a couple of things that ended up working really well that allowed us to, I'll tell you the result of doing this. By bringing outbound in, we went from 20 million to 40 million in a relatively short period of time, just by adding outbound to our inbound motion. The difference that made the difference in the outbound is that we would send a gift to a prospect, a cold prospect, before cold calling him. And it did 2 things. Number one, it allowed the sales team, who had a lot of call reluctance, who did not want to do the cold calls. It allowed them to not be cold calling, but be following up on a gift. Right?
Yeah,
so
it was a warmer call, right?
Warmer call, right?
Yeah.
And then number 2, we had the type of gifts that we had sent, and I could talk about this at greater depth, but effectively the type of gifts would effectively turn that cold lead into a warm lead. So it wouldn't just be following up on the cookies. We would send cookies a lot. It would be, we would send gourmet cookies FedExed overnight to the lead attorney. Those cookies would end up in the break room, where the entire office would be eating these and fighting over them because they're so amazing, so delicious. I mean, like, kind of like you have to hold the wall not to fall down. That's how delicious these are when you're eating them, type of thing. And so the call, when the salesperson would call, instead of getting the typical gatekeeper resistance, it was, "Oh, you're from Scorpion. You sent the cookies. Let me put you through," type of thing.
Right.
Completely changed it. It worked so well for us, Chris, that we ended up allocating 50% of our marketing budget, sales and marketing budget, would go to cookies. At the end, or to gifts. It wasn't always cookies, but at the end of by the time I left, we had a $6 million budget. We were spending $3 million a year just on gifts because it was so impactful.
Okay. So actually, one thing I do want to point out to those of you that say that you can't build a successful business just on referrals is that Scorpion did get to $20 million without any outbound. So that in and of itself is pretty amazing.
Yes.
But let's talk about the cost of acquisition, because that's where my mind goes. Is like, I don't know how much, more or less, what were you guys spending with shipping and obviously the cookies? What were you guys spending on sending out those gifts?
Sure. So I would say that I'll answer your question, but then I'll qualify or give you a mindset and how to think about this. The way the average cost of the cookies and all in was anywhere from $30 to $45
Okay, that's
per
not bad.
send.
That's not bad.
However, not everyone we sent cookies to would get into a sales conversation with us, right? It
Right.
wasn't like a one-to-one. And so the strategy we ended up adopting was we would spend a tremendous amount of time on the list ahead of time. Most
Okay.
people think of outbound like, you spray and pray,
Spray and
spam
pray.
your
Yeah,
TAM,
exactly.
right? Buy a big list and just send a bunch of emails and see what comes back. And of course, the challenge with that is that puts the burden on the sales team to kind of filter a good lead versus bad lead and try and qualify.
Yep.
What we did is we did the list build before at the very beginning aspect of the process. And so we would go to great lengths to only focus on the top 20% of the businesses that we were targeting. So in this case of attorneys, we would have a 3-person sales team for personal injury. The West Coast guy, we would generate a list of, let's say, 500 personal injury attorneys on the West Coast. We would go through those and select the best 250 out of that list. And then we'd have the sales team, the salesperson on the West Coast, he would also go through those 250 and select 150 that he wants the cookies sent to. So these were already pre-sorted, pre-qualified, effectively pre-qualified leads. That's number one. Number two is that majority of those personal injury law firms, despite doing the follow-up, and by the way, the gold's in the follow-up, but despite all the follow-up, a majority of them would ghost until we sent them a gift the next quarter, and then the next quarter, and then the next quarter. And what we were doing effectively is we were communicating that, hey, we were genuinely interested in having a conversation with you. So that's a piece on the strategy. The thing that I inherited when I got to Scorpion was an agency that had figured out about how to retain clients.
Perfect.
Because we knew that every new personal injury attorney would stay with us for 3 years. And let's just say round numbers, they're spending, I'll go on the high end, 10 grand a month. Some of these PI guys, they spend a lot of money. So we were making $360,000 in revenue if they stayed for 36 months. So 36 times 10, right?
Yep.
Our closest competitors were which was Fine Law. They were churning out at a year, right? And so their lifetime value was 120,000 versus ours was 360,000. As a result of that, we were able to have greater spend, a bigger spend. We were able to do better things from a marketing perspective and have more fun, frankly, because we knew that we would generate that revenue. We were aggressive in our marketing. We'd spend a lot. We do a lot of outrageous things so that we can get those sales conversations versus a competitor who had a much shorter lifetime value or much shorter retention, smaller lifetime value. There wasn't enough dollars there to really do any of the type of things that we're talking about.
I love that you bring that up because far too often I see marketers spending too much time focusing on lead generation and not enough time on the actual product, right? So like if your churn is low, then that is an indicator that you have a good product that gets results for the clients, that you do a good job of managing those relationships. But then I just recorded something about this either today or earlier today or yesterday. But the key is like, if you don't have a good product, you need to fix that first, right?
1,000%.
Don't go throwing tons of money at a problem when the actual issue is that your clients are leaving too soon. Because to your point, if you have a great product and your churn rate is, 3% or less, and your clients are now staying with you for 3 years or sometimes more, now you can have a lot more fun and spend more, or I should say invest more to try and acquire those clients. Because you're going to be able, that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is a lot bigger.
So that's why, to me, the number one metric that an agency owner needs to focus on is lifetime value.
Yes, 100%. Well, that's amazing.
That's it.
So still want to know, so what were you guys' target for cost of acquisition? More or less.
Yeah. So
you can tell me in terms of cookies too.
Yeah.
400 cookies acquired.
No, I'd say on average it was between $3,000 to $6,000 cost per acquisition.
Wow. That is high. Is that including salesperson commissions
and
everything?
Everything, all fully baked in. But our product was such that we were serving a market that, if we had a setup fee of $1,000 to $3,000, we were we're almost immediately break even.
Right, right. No, that's awesome. I mean, this also speaks to the importance of working with people that you can make good money from, right? So like
Absolutely.
if an attorney is willing to invest $10,000 and your lifetime customer value revenue is 360 grand, well,
Yeah.
that's great, you know, like, but you
Right.
can't use
Right.
the same type of strategy with somebody that's going to pay you 500 bucks a month.
That's
You
right.
know, that doesn't work.
It does not work. And so that's, to your point, I like working with verticals and markets that have big budgets, right? You
Yeah.
have more margin, you have more money to spend on better account managers, and at the end of the day, better marketing,
Yeah.
and so it's a lot more fun that way.
Well, that's awesome. So I'm sure that
Mm.
there's a lot more that you could teach us, but if you like what Corey's saying so far, definitely hit him up
Yeah.
and try and work with him. But let me ask you a different question now, because now
Sure.
that you're running your own business and you're working with
Yeah.
companies to help them to create similar sales organizations that are not founder driven, what are some of the
Yeah.
biggest mistakes that you're seeing
Yeah.
that they're making? And I'm willing to bet that most of them don't know that they're even making these mistakes.
Yeah. So the biggest one is saying yes to too many different types of clients. And it goes back to this idea of
Hmm.
focus. And the challenge, of course, is that I'll give you an example. So one of my clients, he is again a charismatic founder. He's a member of EO and Vistage, and he has all of these great relationships that he's able to fill up an agency. And the challenge is that every new client that he brings into the agency, it's like a tax on the team because, of course, it's from a different vertical. They have to
Right.
learn. It's about, they have to learn their business. They have to understand how to, be successful. And the at the end of the day, it's a service-based business for most agencies. And so there's a limited number of sort of cycles that the team could put on. And so he came to me because he realized that, hey, I can't keep saying yes because I'm going to lose my good people. Like my employees will quit if I bring on another different type of client. They're just overworked. It's too stressful. Everything is manual.
Got it.
And so the challenge, I think, Chris, is that for agency founders in that position, they have a relatively successful business. And the way they've gotten there is by saying yes. And now
Yes.
it's time for them to start saying no. And so they have to go through a process where they need to figure out, like, what am I truly best at? Where do we really shine? And what's a market that we can get excited about going and focusing on? So that's the first thing, is just not being ready to say no.
So this brings up an interesting point because we work with agency founders as well.
Yeah.
And I think that they all know that they need to niche. And I think that they
Mhm.
all know that they need to be disciplined in the way that they run the company. When you're starting a
Yeah.
marketing agency, it's kind of just like doing
Yeah.
whatever you can to
Right.
survive, like
Get into business. Yeah.
it's fun, it's exciting, it's also very chaotic, and eventually you kind of you evolve and things have
Mhm.
to become more structured, right? And so that's where this concept of like niching down and creating
Mhm.
SOPs and things like that
Yeah. That's
start
right.
to take hold. The challenge that I see is the evolution of the owner. And
Mhm.
sometimes the owner can be their own worst enemy in the sense that they undermine a lot of the things that they are verbally committing to doing. So how would you deal with that? Because, and I'm saying this like in a kind way, because
Mhm.
oftentimes these agency owners don't know that they're doing it. But what do
Yeah.
you do if the agency owner says, I want to go in this niche, but no, I want to go in this niche, but I want to go in this
Sure.
niche. And they just have a hard time really committing to a horse,
Yeah.
like what do you do to try and solve that issue?
So if they're making the kind of, if they're oscillating back and forth between different ideas, they're probably not ready for me
Mm,
because they probably haven't felt the pain enough of
got
making
it.
of being in that situation, because they will start and stop and start and stop, and they will not actually get any benefit of that effectively chaos that they're creating for themselves and their employees.
Right.
And so it's until they realize that this, by continuing to do this behavior and flip flop and do all these things, I'm not going to get the result I want. I'm ready to actually commit. I just need to find someone who can take my hand and help me to commit and get through this process of identifying the right vertical, validating it's big enough that I'm
Hmm.
actually going to achieve the business outcomes that I want by doing this.
Hmm.
All of that's really where I come in, but they have to be ready.
Got it. Okay. So if they're not committed to making the change, then you're just like, okay, let's wait.
Well, it's
The
like,
teacher will appear when the student is ready.
yeah, and it's like, what's the saying? It's like someone convinced against something about it. Like if you try and convince someone against their will, they're of the same mind still. Like you can't ultimately get someone to buy into this and be fully, committed if they're not ready. Like they have to be ready.
I love that you have the balls to say that, because a lot of people will like, no, well, there's something we can do. And I'm like, no, but you're a man of your word. You're committed to the
Yeah.
process. So that's great.
Yeah, but as soon as you're ready, I'm ready to move quickly. Like we can go through this process, and effectively it is, you need to get focus, right? Find the vertical market. Typically, if you're an operating agency, you have a good idea, you have a gut feeling of like, who's the right vertical that we want to
Mhm.
actually lean into. We go through a process to validate that, right? We look at data, we look at your
Mhm.
client data and so on and so forth, make a very high quality decision. And I think the part of the decision that really gets them hooked emotionally is when they realize that, let's say they want to target plumbers. Well, there are, and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there's something like 13 to 15,000 or maybe a lot more plumbing businesses in the US that make a certain amount of money. Well, all they have to do is just close 1 to 2% of that market, which is a tiny number,
Mhm.
and have a multi, 10 to $15 million agency
Mhm.
just by focusing. And as a result of doing that, they'll be able to make a very healthy business, great margins, great lifestyle, all the things that typical agency owners get into this business for in the first place.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have a big question for you. This is kind of like
Okay.
going into the future, right? So
Okay.
I know that you know what you're talking about on the marketing and sales side. What do you think is going to happen to the industry, the
Mm,
agency industry, considering all
mm.
the changes that are taking place with technology, specifically with AI, both on
Yeah,
the marketing but also on operations? Like,
sure.
like because there's some people that are saying that agencies are all going under, or that 80% of agencies are going under. Which,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
of
don't
course,
buy that.
those types of people are selling a course, so they're trying to
Right.
scare you
Yeah,
into buying their
exactly.
shit. But what
Exactly.
do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. So if you think about it if you zoom all the way out, what is the agency? It's a company that has specialty in providing a specific service that that their clients are not going to build in house. They have to rely on a third party who's a specialist in marketing. Well, as it relates to AI, I believe that most businesses will not have an AI expert in house,
Correct.
or they won't have the capacity to be able to build that in house. They're going to need to find an expert who could help them to figure out how to apply AI to their business.
Okay.
So just like an agency can specialize in serving plumbers with marketing, they can also specialize in serving plumbers with AI, how to leverage AI. So I think because agencies are very well positioned, especially those that are focused on a specific vertical market, to take all the noise and all the innovation and all the software and all the technology that relates to AI and translate that into English for
Hmm.
their plumbing clients and be
Hmm.
very well positioned to be an expert in that way as well.
Yeah. On the marketing and sales side, how do you think it'll
Mhm.
change from a prospecting perspective? Because I hear what you're saying, in the sense that I think that it's always going to be true that people will struggle with technology
Yeah.
and embracing and implementing that technology. So on
Mhm.
that side, I think it'll be, though there will always be a need for, let's just call them an agency. On
Mhm.
the other hand, the AI technology is aggressively trying to replace people, right?
Sure.
And I would argue that business owners have all been burned by some sort of marketing agency owner. I use that term also loosely because there's so many scammers in the industry.
Yeah.
They've all been burned by some unscrupulous scam artist marketing agency owner. So
Yeah.
there is a motivation from the technology companies, Facebook and Google to be specific, to replace the human component of running those ads and generating leads.
Mhm. Mhm.
On top of that, I think that it's very likely that the efficiency at which we're able to produce leads and sales will improve because of the technology. Let's just
Mhm.
take analyzing ads, right? Ad performance. Yeah,
Mhm.
we would have a person basically look at the reports and then make decisions based on that. AI will be able to look at that and then make those decisions very quickly and actually do the implementations a lot faster, right?
Without emotion.
Without emotion, right? It's like, these are the facts, these are the numbers, this isn't working, let's just make
Right.
these changes.
Right.
So the cost of delivery is going to go down. So
Mhm.
then that could create, it could in one scenario create an environment where agency margins go through the roof. But I think what will actually
Mhm.
happen is that the prices will start to come down a
Of
bit,
course.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that case, maybe we can't spend as much money to go out and acquire those clients. I don't know.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you think that's going to impact us?
So a couple of thoughts. One of the things that AI has done is it's made it very cheap to produce products. All of a sudden you can put a couple prompts into ChatGPT and have a working piece of software.
Mhm.
And so as a result of that, you're going to get a proliferation of AI tools that are going to cause folks your typical agency client, whether they're a large enterprise or more likely an SMB client,
Mhm.
they're not going to be in a position to be able to discern, test, qualify all of these AI based tools,
I
even the
agree.
marketing
Yeah,
ones, right?
I
And
agree.
so as a
100%.
result of that, they're going to be overwhelmed really quickly, which is why the human to human relationship based, sales approach is going to be more important than ever, because a business owner is going to want to be able to look someone in the eye and say,
Mhm.
can you help me with this? Because I'm overwhelmed with all of these things. They all sound amazing. I've
Right.
tried a couple, they didn't really work out. Like, what do I do? So as a result of that, just the proliferation of all this software that's coming, just to me, it underlines and emphasizes the need for having direct relationships with the market. So sort of
I
doing the
love it.
opposite of the scalable approach.
I love your optimistic approach. I would just say that maybe AI gets so good that the customer doesn't know that they're actually talking to a robot on a Zoom call.
Well,
Maybe.
my
Mic
yeah,
drop.
my wife is a psychiatrist, and I
Oh,
think I think what's happening in that world, there's if you saw the latest ChatGPT 4.0 and
oh
you
yeah.
have this sort of this her related,
Yes.
this agent, the interesting thing about psychiatry is that there is a lot of data that's required to make high quality decisions. And so if you layer the data computing skills of
Hmm.
AI
Hmm.
as well as this personality driven thing, it's going to change, I think, mental health in a positive way. I'm
I
not sure
agree.
how it's going to affect my wife's business, but specifically, but I think overall it's going to have a positive impact in mental health.
Yeah, I like that.
Mm.
Well, let's wrap up here. So you've got an exciting new book that you have written. It's called Anyone, Not Everyone, A Proven
Mm.
System to Escape Founder-Led Sales. And I see
Yes,
you got
there
a
it
copy
is.
right there. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
So how can we get a
It's
copy of that?
Yeah, well, so Chris, for your listeners, I would love anyone who wants to get a free copy, a free audiobook version. They can go to my website right now and get it. Start listening literally right now. It's at anyonenoteveryone.com. You can start listening to the audiobook. It's also available on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible, and all those other places.
I love it. I will personally get my copy today. So thank you for
Oh,
so much for
beautiful.
offering that to our audience. And if somebody is interested in talking to you or hiring you, what's the best way that they can get in touch with you?
Thank you, Chris. So best way is you can actually go to my website, which is tied to anyone.everyone.com.
Mhm.
That will land you on my website. And on there, you can learn about all the free tools I have. I have a newsletter, a podcast, a lot of great content, very valuable content for people, as well as opportunities to work with me in either a group environment or one-on-one environment.
Love it. Thank you so much, Corey, for coming on the show. You've
Yeah,
been a
this has been a
fantastic guest,
blast.
man. Love it.
Thanks, man.
Hopefully we'll have you on
Appreciate
again
it.
soon.
Appreciate it.
Take care, man. All right. Hey, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you would subscribe to the podcast and also share it with friends, family, and basically anyone you know who will find the same value in this episode as you do. So, to get the latest from me, then let's connect on social media on the Facebooks at facebook.com/Dude Agency or Instagram at dudeagency.io. Then you can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and even TikTok. Yes, I'm that cool. We are on TikTok. Finally, go to our website at dudeagency.io, where you can see all of our other episodes of Operation Agency Freedom, register for live trainings on how to run a highly profitable agency, and you can see exactly how we help marketing agencies fix their operations and scale to 8 figures and beyond. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.